we've tried to invite today both parish councils, should they wish to attend, district councillors, county councillors, National Park Authority members. Lots of you obviously are going to be wearing several hats anyway. Really just to give you a bit of an update in terms of the joint work that both the National Park Authority but also Visit Exmoor, who Emma represents, have been working on in terms of tourism recovery. So what I'm going to do in terms of a format for today, I've prepared a brief presentation. We hope no more than about kind of 15-20 minutes. Give you a bit of an update on what we've been doing so far in terms of tourism recovery work, and then there'll be an opportunity for any questions. So I think probably, given there's quite a few of us on a video call, the simplest thing to we run through the presentation and hold any questions until the end. But there's a good chance we might cover them later on in the presentation. So we'll try and rattle through the presentation relatively quickly and get on to kind of taking any views from yourselves and input that you might have, if that's okay. So hopefully I will be able to share the presentation. Just bear with me. Thank you, first of all, for giving up your time. We just thought it would be useful. A lot of work's been going on very much behind the scenes over the last kind of however long it's been now, since the middle of March. And I think, to be honest, this virtually started at the Visit Exmoor AGM. It was pretty much one of the last kind of public events held, and kind of wondering what was going to happen, and then down happened almost immediately after that. So what we did is, ourselves as a National Park Authority, together with Visit Exmoor, and said we probably need to work jointly with as many partners as we can to try and bring together the tourism sector to respond fairly early on. It was obvious that this was going to have a big impact on tourism, and I think as the situation has evolved, it's a well-known fact really that tourism is, and hospitality sector probably is, the sector that's had the largest impact from COVID. So what we were trying to do really is, I guess from my perspective, from the Park Authority's point of view, and we are talking about Greater Exmoor here, but obviously I come from the park, so you know, we always talk about people, place and prosperity, and I know that many other organisations use those as the kind of three watchwords anyhow, but I guess they were still paramount in our decision. So it was about how can we balance the needs of people in terms of keeping our communities safe, do it in terms of trying to safeguard as many livelihoods as we could. We actually look after the place still and ensure that the impacts on the place are minimised, but also, as you know, say, linking all of that back to the economic recovery. Ultimately, a plan for everybody that's connected with Greater Exmoor, people who live in, or whether it's people who work in or inspired by and visit the area. Being able to do for the first time in a long time really is proactively bring together a whole range of groups, and that list of groups that we've listed multiplying. So we started off with some of the main town groups got involved. National Trust have joined us along the way. We've had North Devon Council have joined us along the way. I think, you know, Emma's been discussing with Loretta how we might get Watch It more involved. And so it's been really an opportunity to effectively ensure that we've got a shared message. All of us have got our own channels that connect to different consumers and visitors. All of us have got relationships with different businesses. And this was a way of trying to bring everybody together with a shared message and responding to those conflicting needs. Over to Emma.
Yeah, so I think the starting point here is the economic impact, and I know you guys already very much have your kind of head around the scale of this on our rural economy. And Dan and I looked at this very early on in the recovery planning, and I think the figure at the moment that gives us the most clarity from a pound perspective is that at least 122 million has been lost during lockdown, so the period April through to June, as a result of COVID-19. That's a big number, but I think for us as a rural economy, and the specifics of us in the Greater Exmoor area are the more proportional view. So from a GVA, the gross value added perspective, that's tourism is 54% of the economy, and if you compare that to the county views in Devon and Somerset, it really underlines why this impact is so dramatic across our area in tourism. And the other figure around that we talk about quite a lot is that at least 60% of all employment on Exmoor is in some way tied to our tourism and visitor economy. So that means across our communities, it's impacting pretty much every household in some way, which is really kind of driving has been driving our focus from the initiation of this. Of course, we're going to be doing some further work now as we move through July and start to understand the financial impact of businesses opening at reduced capacity, our cautious visitor market, attractions that are not opening, and we will update and circulate that. But I think it's the more tangible impacts of those things. For example, we're looking at the moment at the impacts on certain towns if an attraction isn't opening fully, or it isn't opening till later in the year or to next year, and the knock-on effect that has businesses. And it's those tangible impacts that are really driving the kind of next phase on the tourism economy.
Great. So in terms of a plan, this slide just gives you a bit of an overview of plan came together. Really, it had three kind of primary objectives, if you like. The first was to respond to the situation as best we could. It was a very rapidly evolving situation, as you'll all be aware. And so our response initially was around how can the tourism sector support the stay-at-home message. And I think to be some credit given to the tourism sector here, and that pretty much bar none wholeheartedly got on board and actually did encourage people to stay at home despite the impact obviously on their businesses. So I think, you know, they responded well, and they responded quickly to that. The other areas that we were seeking to achieve under response was around how we kind of protect and support businesses, how we make sure they've got access to information. So I've had conversations with some of you, but to small businesses who, despite the huge energy and efforts that the districts put into getting the grants out, some businesses were still saying, well, we weren't aware of it. So, you know, we had a bit of a challenge really to try and help those particularly very small businesses understand what support and help was out there for them to get them through. Wanted to try and use the opportunity to ensure that we maintained and grew brand awareness of Exmoor, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the work we did in a moment around that, but it was actually quite successful really in saying in lockdown you can't come to Exmoor now, but you can still discover about Exmoor, and that worked quite well. And we obviously wanted to spend the time to plan ahead to the next stages. The React stage, and I guess we're probably almost in React at the moment, which was almost a yo-yo in between respond and recover. It's this period where gradually things are becoming back to normal, but we're not back to normal yet, as Emma's already suggested. Despite the lifting of restrictions for the weekend, businesses have not yet reopened. Some will probably not reopen at all this year. Where they have reopened, it's often at reduced capacity, etc. We are also aware of the potential for things to be put back in place, whether that be nationally or whether it be a local lock, you know, if the R rate or if the cases start growing at a rapid rate. So that's where we are really now, where it's just being fairly responsive. And what we've agreed with the partners is that at this stage, we don't see a need to do a lot of proactive promotion of Exmoor. Our focus on that will come in the autumn, hopefully, when we will have a better understanding of where we are. At the moment, I think that when we've got reduced supply, the demand and supply are probably meeting each other. Whereas come the autumn, hopefully, there might be a bit of slack space. Well, not hopefully, but yeah, come the autumn, we expect there to be a bit of slack space, in which case we'll want to more proactively market people coming to the area, which will help to claw back some of the lost time. Of recovery, so that will be the kind of final stage, and in bits of recovery work now, but it's very much around how we convert that awareness of Exmoor into visits, how we manage tourism responsibly and safely, both in terms of the impact on communities, the impact on the landscape, etc., and how we continue to support businesses, because I think, you know, we all know the scenario for tourism businesses in this sector. they depend on the summer trade to see them through the winter. So lots of people refer to the free winter scenario, whereby effectively they're going through 3 lots of winters concurrently without opportunity to really make the money that would normally see them through. What we've got at the bottom is just some of the principles that we've had really working as a collective of organisations. So to say is we have been working as a network. There's no hierarchy here. There's no bureaucracy or shared kind of resources. It's just very much been about bringing different partners together and saying, how can we collaboratively work on this? It's been around, how can we agree some consistent messages? How do we use our resources effectively so that we're not duplicating one another? How do we ensure that we engage with everybody that needs to be engaged with as closely as we can? And how do we perhaps develop some ideas, which I think we all know more people coming together to develop a strong innovation is going to be better than 1 or 2 working in silo.
Yeah, so this is really just a capture of how the Exmoor brand has been at the heart of our strategy, from a promotion, from a communications, and also bringing everybody together, the tourism businesses, our tourism partners, in a shared identity. And interestingly, I think Dan mentioned, but this is in very difficult circumstances. This has actually been an unforeseen opportunity to showcase and strengthen our brands, and I'll touch on it a little bit later, but we've seen an increase in our social media audiences and in press interest, etc., kind of through what we've done over this period. The other thing it's done is brought our partners across Greater Exmoor together like never before, actually, to really communicate on consistent messages, which I think is one of the factors has actually helped us broaden our market, because everyone's using their own channels but communicating in a consistent way, which brings everybody back together to the kind of the core branding of Exmoor. So we started back in March with the dream messaging, and obviously I know you're all aware we focus very hard on the responsible messaging around visit Exmoor safely. Visit Exmoor later, and as Dan mentioned as well, our virtual Exmoor focus, which was bringing Exmoor to our audiences at home who weren't able to come and enjoy that, and we found it really successful. And some of the initiatives we ran around that, some of the videos we produced with our local businesses, also really added that kind of stronger together spirit to the tourism businesses here. And then we moved into the Discover phase, still very much under the Visit Exmoor Later banner, but dreaming of Exmoor and My Exmoor, kind of bringing heartwarming stories for what some of the businesses were doing locally to adapt some of the community things that people were getting involved with, again, out to that same audience. And we're now very much at the beginning of the Explore messaging, and hopefully you'll all see very clearly that we are communicating the Visit Exmoor safely message, along with the warm welcome, and linking into some Visit England national campaigns around pre-planning and know before you go. And I think our key focus at the moment is that we obviously promote that people come to Exmoor and have an enjoyable visit, but we're asking them to do it safely. We're asking them to respect the communities, and trying to give them as much information as they can to really achieve that and have a phenomenal stay. And as Dan said, I think as we move through the summer, where hopefully we will get a capacity and demand kind of meeting each other with people who are wanting to go on visits, we can really look at what's happening, and that can inform us as we go into the autumn of the different themes, the markets we want to target to bring visitors in during the autumn, winter, and into the spring next year. I think the only other thing I'd say around the branding piece is just it's also really supported our focus on communicating with our communities. And again, Dan touched on earlier, I think all tourism organisations have communicated responsibly, and I really think the way that our businesses have communicated across Exmoor has really helped the community messages that everybody is working together, and that safeguarding our communities has been the highest priority, and the same going forward. Okay, Dan.
So this next slide just really talks about some of the opportunities and the challenges just for considerations that we went through when compiling the plan. The industry research has highlighted that trends that were beginning to emerge prior to COVID are actually being strengthened as a result. These trends are things like a growing interest in sustainable tourism, responsible tourism, however you want to phrase it. There is already a strengthening of the UK domestic market, and obviously at the moment, by default, almost that's happening. I think particularly relevant for Exmoor as well is that there is a bit of a move away from consumers no longer wanting to go after the most sought after kind of cliched iconic sites, but they were wanting to go off the beaten track, discover new places and discover authentic experiences. And that's something that we've been working on anyway as a kind of destination for quite some time now, but I think Exmoor is well placed to respond to that. And, you know, as I say, all of the research from the likes of Visit Britain, Visit England, etc., points to that these are trends which are going to continue to grow just because of, but certainly as a result of COVID. In terms of challenges, I guess the four main challenges we had, one was the strength of community anxiety, certainly at times. I think seems to not be as high as it has been, but certainly we are aware during the lockdown period and initially when the countryside was reopened, yet hospitality businesses couldn't open. You know, there were some very strongly held views within the community about concerns for their safety as a result of people coming back into the area. There was a challenge around competition. You know, in all of this, there have been lots of comparisons made to foot and mouth disease, where obviously we know that we've kind of gone through this lockdown before, we've come out of it the other side, and there are some lessons to be learnt there, but equally there are some quite differences, the main one being that competition, because when it was foot and mouth, only really impacting on the rural areas, it was only impacting, you know, parts of the UK and Western Europe, and was primarily, even locally, it was only some areas. So, you know, maybe a town like Minehead wouldn't have been directly impacted in the same way as maybe a village like Exford would. Whereas obviously with foot and mouth, we're competing pretty much with the whole sector across the world. And so there'll be stiff competition from people trying to restart and reinvigorate their tourism sector. The challenge is, of course, there are so many unknowns, lots of rumours going around, lots of Chinese whispers. Nobody quite knew what announcements were going to come out of number 10 when and how and all the rest of it. So we've had to respond quite quickly. And I think there was also a potential challenge around these kind of short bursts of over-tourism, if you want to use that phrase. So, and we've probably not seen it. There had been fears around, for example, this weekend, Super Saturday, as some people referred to it. Are we going to be absolute chock-a-block? And there's no doubt we got busier, but, you know, it seems it wasn't unmanageable. I think we probably had a greater challenge those first couple of weekends when the countryside was reopened, and people obviously had nothing else available for them to do other than get out into the countryside, and having been cooped up at home, coinciding with very good weather, they did come out en masse, and we did have a few issues, but they've all been fairly well managed. But it was a challenge for us to consider. We've already mentioned we were also kind of considering that there might be a fluctuation, and indeed there could still be a fluctuation around some of the social distancing measures and in particular travel restrictions. So we may see some restrictions being lifted and then reimposed. We had to respond to fear, and we've already touched upon the community anxiety. But I think the other issue around fear is actually around fear of travel. So it's around sure that consumers are confident enough that when they come here, that the businesses are taking the steps that they need to keep them as safe as they possibly can. And then I guess overarching all of this really is our thought around we need to be delivering a long-term and a sustainable approach to this. So just having a couple of busy weekends in August isn't going to be enough to claw back what's been lost. And so, we are very much looking at driving those seasonal opportunities and how we kind of bring this together over the long term. Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, so this is just this one's just a very brief summary, really, of a couple of examples of how we promoted well throughout the last period, and I think kind of setting the scene for how we will continue to promote the area going forward. The two specific ones to focus on are the two videos which were released. So in April time, we released a really heartwarming Visit Later video reinforcing safe messages, but also profiling the area in actually glorious weather as a kind of heartwarming treat for our virtual audience at home, which was really well received. We then followed up very recently with our "We Can't Wait to Welcome You" messaging, and we've really tied that in with the safe visiting messaging again. And just as an example of how effective that was, those two videos to date have received over 65,000 views collectively. We know that that's from audiences who are interested in Exmoor because that's through our social media channels. So these are people who have said that they want to be in touch with Exmoor and just really being quite phenomenal. Interestingly, during the last period, our Visit Exmoor social media audiences have been growing at around 5% every month, which is phenomenal. And I think that represents people at home and how we've been able to reach them and perhaps attract new visitors to the area. You may have also seen in the press, Exmoor has been picked up in a couple of articles as the least visited national park, and maybe now's the time to change that. I think, as Dan says, we're working carefully with those types of messages to try and leverage those for the point past the point past summer, to make sure we get more than just a short burst of benefit from that. But I can also see through our inboxes that we've got several other national press interest in similar type of coverage. So we promoted in an appropriate way. We've also communicated our responsible messages and really supported the communities. And we've communicated, even if these are Visit Exmoor campaigns, we've done this really across our tourism partnership now, pushing these things out throughout our channels and enabling some of the town tourism bodies to really put their own spin on certain things as well. Okay, thanks, Dan.
Okay, so the other thing that we've been doing very much really behind the scenes is just trying to monitor the impact. So as a National Park Authority, we've led on two bits of work, which again, we've kind of extended it wider than just the National Park, but really looked at the greater Exmoor area. One was a business impact survey. This wasn't restricted to tourism providers. We looked at the impact that COVID was having on the local economy. It was to complement some other work we were doing on rural enterprise Exmoor to try and, which we'd started that prior to COVID, to really try and understand rural economy better than we did. So we wanted to just update some of that research with the impact that COVID had. Being able to filter it down though within the tourism sector. So for example, 95% of businesses within the tourism sector had stated that the impact of COVID had been severe or negative. Again, it's about 90%, I think, of accommodation providers had ceased trading altogether, but hadn't ceased trading altogether were either those that accommodation might be their primary business, but they also offer meals, and some were doing things like takeaway meals. So, some hotels and things were saying, we'll offer takeaway meals, etc. There were one or two accommodation providers who were offering accommodation to key workers who were wanting to isolate from their families for their own safety. So that's where a few of them kept going, but the vast majority had to close. So the barriers to recovery, a lot of it was around the lockdown restrictions. This survey was completed before the restrictions were lifted. So you know, obviously that was pressing large on people's minds. But many of the comments were really about how many of our businesses, particularly those that are in fairly traditional buildings where it's not easy to implement some of the social distancing measures, lots of concern around market shrinkage, consumer confidences, and the uncertainty about some of the legal implications around reopening and liabilities, etc., were weighing high on people's minds. Tandem with a business survey, we've also run a virtual visitor survey. So via Facebook and Twitter and other social media channels, whereby partners who are in the tourism network, the survey link out. It's been made available for individual businesses to send the survey out to their mailing lists of either previous clients or possibly people who have expressed an interest in staying with them, to get a view really from consumers. What do they feel about visiting Exmoor? Surveys are available online. We'll send you the link to the full details. But I think a few things to pick out from that, and we've not closed the survey, so these are the interim results. We've had about 150, 600 responses to this so far, open until the 15th of July. But so far, 46% of visitors are saying generally they can't wait to return to Exmoor. 42% say that they feel Exmoor is safer than many other options that they're looking at for holidays. Interestingly, exception of obviously having to adapt to social distancing, so you know we kind of took that as a given, but 50% state they don't anticipate any real change in their behaviour. So while some people are saying we're more likely to go self-catering, we are less likely maybe to eat out, or we won't be going to formal attractions, or we'll be visiting quieter locations. Over half of responses so far say that, with the exception of social distancing, they don't anticipate any real change. And I guess for me, the most encouraging statistic is that 82% are very likely to visit in the next 18 months. So we've given it quite a long time window there. 15% are likely to visit. So, you know, the vast majority of kind of those people that we're already engaged with, you know, so that primarily is going to be focusing on previous visitors, but they are likely to return. We did actually do a few promoted posts on social media, so we reached beyond people who are already engaging with our channels. And but I think last time it was about 6% of respondents have been to Exmoor, so we were kind of getting their views as well. About 10-15% hadn't been in over 3 years, which many statistics or kind of visitor surveys would class that as a new visitor if they haven't been for some time. So I think there's some encouraging results there. Been sharing those results with businesses, particularly on the day that the announcements were made around the lifting of restrictions on hospitality providers. We were able to get out the interim results to businesses so that we could then see how consumers were reacting and what measures they might put in place to respond to any concerns or opportunities that consumers identify.
Yeah, so this is really a view of our networks and where we now have a voice. And I think this is interesting because alongside a lot of the topics we've covered today, I think a lot of the networks that we have from an Exmoor tourism point of view were already there, but actually through the COVID-19 initial crisis, we've kind of established and strengthened those and inputted into a lot of those discussions as well. And as a voice, I think Exmoor has, as a result, Exmoor has more of a voice than we ever have done before. So an example of that is Visit Exmoor's inclusion with the regional task force. So that's Exmoor as a national park and the Greater Exmoor area included in discussions with Visit Cornwall, Visit Devon, Visit Somerset, etc., etc. And notable in that is that Dartmoor, for example, isn't represented in part of that discussion, and we've really been able to lift Exmoor up as an example of a rural area, and have some really strong inputs into these discussions, and in turn that delivers us huge benefits back. And actually, through the DMO engagement, so the regional DMO task force, we then become part of the Visit Britain and Visit England focuses. We have a regional representative that we now feed into, Robin Jolly, and through that for the area, we've seen and inputted all sorts of value. So first of all, we have the benefit of some support funding to make sure that basic operations can continue running during this difficult period, which has allowed us as Visit Exmoor to give all of our paying members a deferral period during the crisis and take that burden away from them, but ensure that they're still able to benefit from all of the support we're giving through this period, which has been phenomenal. There are outputs from Visit Britain around their consumer confidence survey, which has been, I think, Dan, for about 6 weeks now, updated on a weekly basis. That's fed some of the views and underlined some of our understanding of the views that Dan's been talking about. So, for example, at the moment, the Southwest remains the most popular destination for visitors who are still planning to travel in the next period. And countrysides, small towns and villages remain the most popular destinations of choice as well throughout that, which as we start to plan how we promote into the future is really helpful to us. It also actually really plays to our strengths here on Exmoor, and that's been phenomenal intel that comes through there. We've also been able to hook our businesses into the We're Good to Go programme through Visit England and Visit Britain, which is an industry standard, self-accredited, which means our businesses can really play their part in underlining consumer confidence that our businesses here on Exmoor are safeguarding and putting the right processes in place from a visit point of view. And we've also been able to increase through that relationship with Robin our promotion on the Visit England website, whereas previously Exmoor has kind of been hidden, I think, under dark skies on both Devon and Somerset. We're now currently at this moment working with Visit England to have our own Exmoor content on Visit England. So just that one relationship on its own and what's happened during the last period has in itself delivered us huge benefits. And as I say, across some of the other partnerships that you see there, both myself and Dan have spent quite a lot of time on industry, area and whatever recovery, but inputting on behalf of our area. The first important part of that is we really get the specifics of our rural economy across, which might be different when you look at areas on a more broad basis, but also again has really put Exmoor on the map. And those are things now that we have to build on going forward, to leverage going forward to the benefit of everybody. Thanks, Dan.
We just got a couple of slides to finish with now. One of the things we wanted to emphasise as well is that not only have we been talking about the strategy and the consultation and all of that kind of influencing work we've been doing, but we have also collectively as a range of partners been working on a number of actions that we can deliver to actually support the recovery. These are projects that we've kind of reimagined. They were perhaps projects that were going to be happening anyway, but we've reimagined them and reworked them to respond as part of our recovery package. Some of them are new projects that have come forward as a result. So I've just highlighted a few here. For example, the bottom left, some of you, it's been on TV 3 or 4 times now, and that's something that Dunster Tourism Forum did as a local tourism association, putting up bunting all around Dunster. And there's numerous examples in all of the local kind of associations who have done different kind of initiatives. Up at the top there, it's not very easy to see, but one of the things we've been doing is actually we managed to get all of the local groups are now kind of saying we no longer want to work in silo. We appreciate we're part of something bigger here. And so I think as an example, Porlock realised that most of their visitors will enjoy a day out to Lynmouth and vice versa. Lynmouth visitors will also want a day out in Porlock. And so what they've worked together as a collective is to put together a whole load of suggested driving routes across Exmoor, which take in all of the main towns and settlements, so that again we're trying to get to the idea really as they come back to Exmoor that there's a lot more to Exmoor than just for one destination they're going to, spreading the benefits, spreading the love. There's been some slightly different projects as well, so it's unusual perhaps to have a Farming UK screenshots in a tourism presentation, but that's a project where Park Authority, Visit Exmoor and the Hill Farming Network have all worked together to promote the buy local message, and in particular there's been a new lamb kind of launched whereby people can easily get hold of the information as to where they can mail order Exmoor specific lamb and get it shipped out across the country. I think ITV are going to be featuring that tomorrow night or Friday night, probably they said towards the end of this week. So, you know, that's been another good example, and that was a bit of work that was already happening, but COVID has really pushed the kind of buy local message, and so we've been able to follow that through. The COVID countryside code is something that we did really in response. It was reacting to those very big visitor pressures that we had once the restrictions were lifted on visiting the countryside. And perhaps the most interesting thing from the perspective coming from the Park Authority is we've talked about how do we introduce a new audience to Exmoor. You know, if you look at our average visitors to the national park, they are of a certain type, of a certain age, etc., etc. And we've often talked about how do we get younger audiences in, how do we get more families in, how do we get some of the people who live in kind of just beyond Greater Exmoor. So, you know, how do you get people from Tiverton, from Taunton, from Barnstaple, from Bridgewater, etc., using Exmoor as a fantastic asset and resource to them. And actually COVID kind of did that for us. It's one of those silver linings, I guess. But with it, a lot of, you know, we had a big influx of people who visited Exmoor before, didn't really understand it, didn't quite know what to do or what the expectations in terms of behaviour were. So we've been working with a range of partners to get that countryside code out there to try and influence behaviour in a positive way. And that seems to have gone down well so far. A final example project, and there's many more examples I could have picked off, but another one we're working on is a whole suite of new short walks. So again, this is something that was planned to take place over the next 12 months, but we've tried to accelerate it so we can launch it in the autumn of this year rather than in the spring of next year. Our research really highlighted in the past that there's a bit of a gap, that the vast majority of people come to Exmoor for walking, not looking for long day walks, they are looking for short walks of up to 2 hours. And if you go into, say, any of the information centres, national park centres, tourism centres, etc., all of the self-guided leaflets are for walks of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. So we've put together a suite of 10 walks which are all under 2 hours, all fairly easily accessible. You don't need the latest equipment, you don't need to be confident in the countryside. It's all laid out for you in a very easily guide. So they're being worked on, 10 walks across the whole of the park, and I say we're aiming to launch those in the early autumn, really, again with the idea of encouraging people back. So there's been a huge amount going on, lots of things that I haven't discussed, but hopefully you'll get the picture that there's been a lot of strategy and planning and discussion going on, but there's also been some action behind all of that. So Emma, for a final slide.
Yeah, so pretty much everything that Dan and I have covered today is really about engagement, and engagement that we had prior to COVID, and how some of that has been strengthened and will continue into the future. We've talked about engaging with the communities, pretty much through everything we've done, trying to respond to concerns, supporting the balance and the understanding of the balance between health and wealth. And I think probably all of you would have seen the open letters, their letter to fellow residents, which went from all of the tourism partners around the time that day visitors and the government guidelines relaxed restrictions and allowed people to come for day visits. And Dan said earlier there was kind of quite a peaking concern, and we communicated really strongly with fellow residents around that, and I think that was really positive. I talked quite extensively about engaging with our partners and Exmoor playing a part in the bigger picture, which again will continue. Throughout this, we've engaged with the specific businesses across our area, and also I think really strengthened our role in supporting those businesses. From a Visit Exmoor perspective, we've actually introduced a free associate member program, which will now, it's a permanent program, it will continue. Any tourism or visitor related business, which across Exmoor is pretty much all of our businesses, are welcome to join Visit Exmoor for free. They get access to the business support hub and to a consistent and relevant stream of links, health, education, support, central government, local authority, etc., etc., and that's available to all. But also we make all of our messaging and themes available to everybody so that we can all continue to communicate. And it's also supported businesses who've been very nervous about how to communicate during this period. Engaging visitors, and that's kind of inherent in everything we've talked about from our promotion point of view, and will continue on as we go into the next the next period. And then the reason why we're all together today, engaging with you guys, the kind of key stakeholders for our area. We do need your support and we do need your engagement. Really to support our towns and visitors in registering, understanding and accessing support for initiatives and growth as we go through the next period, as I'm sure different streams of innovative support may become available, and you can help us to signpost the businesses to support and interventions. And I think we've touched on the community thing several times, but helping to support and deliver the messages across our communities as our businesses start to reopen, and help us in that reassurance message, and really help underline the fact that the tourism businesses are behaving responsibly and they are doing everything to reopen safely. I think external to Exmoor as stakeholders, really championing our rural sector and communicating and underlining the specific and quite serious impact to our rural economy and our dependency on tourism, and anything you can do to support that in broader channels to draw attention to the support that we're going to need here on Exmoor. And I think the last thing from me is to ask you all to encourage as many businesses as possible to join up to the Visit Exmoor Associate Member Programme. I think you've all had details of that and the link, and I can resend it. And the reason that's critical is we are getting consistent support to our businesses. We are getting consistent messages to our businesses. We also are developing across the board a channel that we can communicate quickly and effectively with our tourism businesses. And as Dan touched on earlier, if we go into unknown periods ahead of us with temporary lockdowns, changes in guidance, etc., it's a really, really effective way of supporting everybody, because everybody's getting the same information at the same time. So any businesses that you know that you can encourage to join the programme, I think we've had about 130 businesses join up now, which is phenomenal. That would be really appreciated. So thank you.
Fantastic. So I will attempt to stop sharing and an opportunity now if anybody wants to raise any questions, any thoughts. But if anybody's got any questions, do they want to put up their hand, whether that be a digital hand or a physical hand, and we'll try and take you in turn. That's probably the easiest, and we're very happy to follow up anything individually afterwards if that's easier as well. Loretta.
I'm not. Can you hear me all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really, really good presentation, and the fact of helping to reassure businesses, but also reassure visitors as well. Before you mentioned it, I'd already written down that we need to, like, people in Watch It who don't want to go any further than sort of 5 miles. It would be good to be able to encourage them to go and visit Exmoor, to look at what's there for them. The walks, I think the walks are a brilliant idea, because I can't walk very far, but 2 kilometres I could do quite easily each way. That would really, that would just about suit me, and then I could have an gin and tonic when I get to the end of it. I would like to sort of like no, we've got our Chamber of Trade here in Watchet. Would it be pertinent, do you think, to just invite all of the members of the Chamber of Trade to become members of the Visit Exmoor? I'm not quite sure whether, you know, you're saying ask, you know, the businesses to join you as associate members. Would you accept that as the Chamber, if the Chamber of Trade in Watchet wanted to join all its members, would you be happy for that to happen?
Yes, certainly. All businesses in our Greater Exmoor area are really welcome to join, and that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, because we've got 70 odd members.
Yeah, no, they would all be more than welcome. And as I say, it gives everybody access to a consistent source of support and information. That would be phenomenal. Because
people who watch it, they go, you know, they stay and watch it. But from Watchet, they use Watchet as a jump-off point. You know, they drive off to Exmoor, to Minehead, to Porlock, and all over the place. They go over to Quantox. So we're in a sense like Watchet and Willerton are sort of like a central area as well, which is very handy. We've got a lot of places for people to stay. And I think, you know, making sure that those leaflets get out to us, particularly the walks, I think that's something, especially autumn time, which is when people want to go for a walk because it's usually the best time. But other than that, a really, really good presentation. I've got it on my thing. I'm going to print it off and give it to Visitor Centre. Okay, but thank you ever so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Loretta. Has anybody else got any questions or observations? Anything they think useful to feed in while we're here?
I think Mandy. Andrea had. Oh, I was just going to say Andrea had a hand as well again.
I think Andrea had a hand up before me, to be fair.
I think you're muted, Andrea.
That's it, I think. Oh, no.
I think you're still muted.
Should we let Mandy go if Andrea works out her
I'll pop in while Andrea's dealing with her mute and unmute. Just to say, really, all the research currently is that a holiday is seen as a luxury, but a short break an essential for people. I just wondered whether there's any work sort of around packaging those sort of short breaks for Exmoor, because shortly that sort of long weekend, a few days midweek, that seems to be where people are still spending their money, even if they can't manage a full family holiday.
Yeah, no, so very much so. That's something we're looking at, and and this is kind of in line with our focus to really join up Exmoor and join up the towns and the villages and the different areas to visit. We're looking at different itineraries as part of a promotional, so suggested itineraries, which helps with some of the challenges that Dan touched on earlier about how we can quite proactively actually disperse tourism across the area and focus on that market. And again, I think coming into the autumn after the summer holiday period is over, those midweek short breaks are very likely to be targeting a market segmentation who are likely to be travelling around that time as well. So yeah, no, that's a really good thought. Thank you.
And I think in Cornwall, a lot of it is people will literally arrive and their time is sorted out, all packaged in and done for them, so they get the maximum experience they can, and then are back to sort of life again, and that seems to work very well.
The other thing to say is that we are still, even certainly this weekend, I know our national park centres are saying there are still a number of new visitors to Exmoor arriving for overnight stays. And so again, it's helping them actually understand what they can do here and how they can plan that trip. So yeah, I think it's a really good comment.
Thank you.
Andrea, I don't know whether we're able to hear you yet. No, oh, that's so frustrating because we heard you at the beginning. If you want to send me a quick email with a question, Andrea, very happy to do that. And if we get it while we're talking together, or if not, respond to you offline. Does anybody else have anything? Yes, Christine?
Oh, Christine, you're also on mute.
I appreciate short breaks are a great idea, but they are very work intensive. short breaks. So you are changing beds and cleaning and self-catering. The rules and regulations on self-catering now through COVID are massive compared with what they were. But what you have to wash every single item in a kitchen between the families coming and going. It's not like you can just give it a quick wipe down. It's very, very labour intensive. And I'm worried about the workforce and whether or not some people will find it difficult. I know what a group that I help with support, they are changing their change days to 3 times in the week to give them time to clean all the apartments to the standard you have to do it. So it is very much more difficult to run a business now than it was before COVID, and I think people will find it extremely tiring, to be honest. And they'll want to do it, of course, but the onus on washing every light switch, washing all down all the paintwork, it's really intensive. It's deep cleaning, even if people have only been there 2 nights. Yeah. So it is a very difficult decision for some people to make.
I think that's partly why we're also seeing reduced capacity at the moment, because some places, if they've maybe got 5 apartments, they're only letting 3 of them at the time for that exact reason, that they can rotate more quickly. The same with serviced accommodation as well. So and I think that's why we're really saying that we do need a long-term approach to this. In that, and there's obviously, I don't know how many of you, I'm sure you've all heard on the news today, but cutting VAT down to 5% for station and food and drink providers. So there is some further support coming through from central government for that, but we are very aware, yes, it's not going to be a case of everything's back to normal now. It's going to be a long haul to establish business as it was. And I guess, without sounding too much like the Chancellor right at the beginning, but there will be casualties, as they've kind of coined a phrase. And so I think that's where anything we can do to support those businesses in terms of just getting out advice and help, and just some of the peer networks where people are sharing ideas and things, I think is really helpful. But it doesn't take away from a huge challenge that some have got. Okay, anybody else got anything else they want to raise?
I thought I saw Nick raise his hand electronically a few minutes ago, but I don't know if he did. Nick, did you have a question?
Yes, just very briefly, really, to do with the Exmoor walks, which is a very good thing. I mean, there are small books around which cover long walks, but the short walks is very good, especially for people who are just staying for a few nights. The only thing I would say is that one of the things you notice is that people used to approach people in the car parks to say, can you tell me where I am on this map? And I would suggest that what you do is that one thing that's done in business is you go out and find a typical tourist, if I can say, give them the map and say, show me how you do this walk. Because it's only those people that are going to have to use the maps are going to be able to identify whether it works or not. It's for us, looking at the map, it's dead easy. Cross the bridge, turn right, up the hill, no problem. But when they sit there in the car parks and look at the map, it doesn't seem as clear to them as it is to me and other people. So just as a point, otherwise, thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I think it's a very fair comment. When we have scheduled in some time to get all of the routes tested before we go to print, and we did say exactly that thing. We almost need to give it to our mums or somebody who's not been involved with the project at all. But equally, I accept that we need to make sure that we are correcting this. But all of the work we've been doing to identify those top walks has been about trying to find very, very simple walks where there are probably no more than 3 or 4 route directions within the whole route. So it's either a linear walk there and back, or it's a circular with very easy to follow, all the way marked. So hopefully that's kind of, I think you've hit on the head, though. That's the demographic we're aiming these at, because I think up till now, that's where we've had the gap. There's been a whole range of walks, whether it's from a park authority, whether it's been from individual publishers, around some of the longer walks, but there's not been a great amount available for those short walks.
Well, it's certainly something we've certainly done in my profession. We used to go and design a user's guide, and then walk out the building and grab the first person that went past. Could be just somebody shopping and say, here we are, can you use this? So it's a very good process, and I'm certain you've gone through that, but it's just something I've noticed when I've been down at the National Park there, HQ, where people stop me and say, I've got this map, where is it? You know, where am I?
I'm back.
A smaller string might help as well, you know, you can tie it one end and walk and then come back the other way.
Well, you could try breadcrumbs, but unfortunately we have a problem with birds.
Or dormice.
Thanks, Nick. Anybody else?
Did John just raise his hand?
Yes, I did. Oh, yeah, sorry, I lost it a bit. I lost connection there for a couple of minutes. My point was that I thought the presentation was really good, and I'd like to circulate the slides around to to interested people. But about 95% of it was in you two talking to it. We'll be able to circulate the recording as well, or a link to it.
Yes, so that's why we were recording it for those that couldn't come. And I think obviously we were initially intending the recording to go to those that were invited to this. But if you're all happy, I've got no problem with it, you know, being more publicly available to any stakeholder. We will
Good
do
idea.
that then.
Please.
Good.
It will take us a day or two to get it online, but yeah, we'll send you the link when it's available.
Dan, I'm afraid I have to leave, so can I thank you very much indeed for that, and Emma as well. Thank you. It's been very illuminating, very helpful, and it will be very helpful to have the recording as well as the slides which you provided earlier, which we can now share, I think, reasonably widely and make everybody aware of what's been going on. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time.
I think we're done, to be honest. I don't see any other hands up, but frantically if I've missed anybody.
You've still got Christine.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm done. Thank you ever so much.
Oh, sorry, Christine.
Did Andrea
For your time.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for inviting me.